We're tired of the purple-haired crazies. We need to get back to common sense and say that he is an aggressive president, moving us back in the right direction. China has cheated us for a very long time. It's time to get it right. At some point, we need to see peace. I know that this comes at a very heavy cost, especially for our Ukrainian friends.
They promised the largest single day of protest in modern US history. The No Kings movement claims that millions of Americans were on the streets this weekend. But I have to say, I think it turned out to be a bit of a flop. Have a look at what these whack jobs are up to. There they are, the ice lice. Grown men and women rolling around on the floor, pretending to be lice or ice agents. I mean, yeah, at least the Democrats had fun.
This is what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like.
No, the government shut down, meaning those two guys got a nice day out. What democracy looks like? I think democracy looked like them losing the House, losing the Senate and losing the popular vote last November. But yeah, at least they got to dress up. Now, Donald Trump has hit back today, saying he worked his ass off to make this country great. But his critics continue to call him a tyrant. Now, to discuss all this, we're joined live by Senator Joni Ernst from the great state of Iowa. Senator, good evening and thank you for joining us. Is Donald Trump a king?
He is a duly elected president of the United States. And I will use President Trump's own words. Congratulations, No Kings, you did it. That today there is no king on the throne here in the United States. We still have a president. So thank you for doing your job. For those of us that truly do celebrate what is a No King's Day, that is July 4th. So we are so blessed to be in this nation where we have democratic elections. And I am so grateful we have been able to demonstrate to the Democrats that President Trump not only won the electoral vote, but he won the popular vote in a landslide. And that's what we need to keep reminding all these crazy liberals on the far left. They lost. Deal with it.
When you see people like Adam Schiff, your colleague there, screaming that this is what democracy looks like and joining along with these sort of boomer protests from what looked like a majority of much older voters, I mean, it does feel like they sort of slightly missed last November and are still fighting the battles of 2016 to 2020 again. You guys just must sort of rub your hands with glee and think, these are our campaign ads for the midterms writing themselves, right?
Yes, absolutely. And if you look out across all of those protesters, you do see an aging demographic. You see people that are just unorganized with their thoughts because there are so many different groups there. There's no one common theme to any of it. And yes, they did lose sight of what happened last November when the overwhelming majority of the American people said, we're tired of the purple-haired crazies. We need to get back to common sense in the United States of America. Therefore, we are going to elect Republicans in the House, in the Senate, and most certainly into the White House. So we have a United States that's finally headed in the right direction after 4 years under Sleepy Joe and misguided Democrats serving in Congress. So, it is America. This is democracy. It is where we allow protests to happen. Most certainly, if we were under a king, kings would not allow for protests against.
Well, I think the king of England doesn't mind the odd protest in the street. We have our fair share of crazies back in London. They kind of have a point with Donald Trump, though, don't they? He isn't exactly your normal president. He was leaning heavily into the king thing this weekend with all sorts of AI videos of him, well, I won't put it too polite. Well, I'm trying to put it politely, but smearing his opponents, shall we say, and wearing a crown. He is pursuing his political opponents in a very aggressive fashion. He does do a lot of things by presidential decree, the executive order, rather than, legislating for things through Congress. They've kind of got a point about him. He's a very presidential president, right?
say that he is an aggressive president, moving us back in the right direction. Executive orders are used by every president. And what we see is that the president is actually getting us back to the way things should be. I mean, if you look at our Department of Defense or Department of War, we are actually focusing on becoming, once again, the most lethal fighting force on the face of the planet. It's something I've preached for a very long time. I mean, we are getting back to securing our borders, making sure that illegal migrants are not flowing all from around the world and penetrating into the United States from our southern border. We are going after those that are trafficking fentanyl into the United States of America. So, yes, is he being aggressive? Absolutely. Who does he have in mind when he is focusing on these things? The American people. He's putting our communities and our safety first, which is something we have not seen in a very long time.
Hand on heart, Senator, are you entirely comfortable with everything that Donald Trump's doing? You cite there the fentanyl across the, into the southern border of America, but those strikes on those boats are highly controversial and legally pretty dubious. Are you comfortable with that level of executive power at the king-like power to essentially, blast submarines and boats out of the water with very little evidence published of who these people actually are?
Well, there is very little evidence published, but yes, I have actually sat through a classified briefing on those strikes down in our skiff here at the Capitol, which was available to Republicans and Democrats. We actually held a hearing in that enclosed room, and we're able to ask a number of questions of the leadership that are engaged in targeting those boats. And I believe that they are legally sound. And I actually am glad that we have a president that's actually doing something about these narco terrorists. So I do believe there is a strong legal basis behind these strikes. I think the president is doing the right thing. We do have a lot of intelligence that points at the fact that these are narco terrorists. I mean, we have exquisite intelligence that tells us so. So I do have confidence in the president and what he is doing to protect Americans. There are not many people in the United States of America that hasn't known a family or has been directly connected to someone that has lost their life as they struggle with addiction here in the United States of America. So I'm okay with it. I'll be honest, I'm okay with it.
What about going further? The president's hinted that he'd like to perhaps, be striking drug smugglers and narco-terrorists, as you call them, on the ground. America doesn't have the best success, I have to say, and forgive me, with the greatest of respect, it doesn't have the best respect to intervening in South America over the years. Would you be happy to see strikes on land, or possibly even the concept of boots on the ground?
Well, I can't say that I would be happy about that. No, I can't go that far. But what I can say is that the president is throwing down a warning marker. And by doing that, I think he's trying to engage some of the foreign leaders in actually policing up their own states and getting serious about these terrorists that are running rampant through their countries. So I think what we need to do is continue to develop those mill-to-mill relationships, making sure that we are working with the leaders in these other countries. But again, it's incredibly important that the president is actually throwing down the marker and saying, you know what, America comes first. Leaders in other countries, you need to start policing your own bad behaviors within your own countries. If it is affecting the United States of America, we will find a way forward. Now, I believe in utilizing soft power much more in these situations, so whether it is the trade wars that we have out there, other means, cutting off aid to those countries, those are the things that need to be discussed first. But then beyond that, it's up to the president working with Congress and the Department of War on how we handle those other situations. But believe me, this is a president who is not asleep at the wheel like we saw President Joe Biden. So if he's engaging leadership in these other countries, I'm really grateful for it.
On that exact point, you led me nicely to my next question, which is about the soft power and trade diplomacy of Donald Trump. In China, the president was saying that trade talks are on track, says we're going to have a great deal with China, but it has to be a fair deal with China. How do your voters and constituents and yourself, how do you see a fair deal with China looking for the American people?
Well, a fair deal with China, and I will speak from an agricultural community. I was raised on a farm. My family farms soybean and corn, so operations. And what we have seen China do through so many decades is push back upon the American farmer. So while Iowa does a lot of trade, or we used to do a lot of trade with China, China would secure contracts, say on soybeans, and those soybeans would be loaded onto giant ships and heading across the Pacific. And then you know what China would do? They would cancel the contracts while the soybeans are out in the middle of the ocean. And then China would come back and say, oh, well, you know, we're going to cut a great deal for you, Iowa soybean farmer. We're going to renegotiate. We'll pick up those contracts again, but we're going to give you a lower price. And you know what? The Iowa soybean farmer has no choice but to accept a lower negotiated price with the Chinese. This is how the Chinese operate. So what the president doing is trying to reset the strategy with China. So most Iowa farmers are excited about the opportunity. Unfortunately, what we don't want to see is the loss of that huge market for our farmers. So if we don't trade with China, what we have to do is see the president and his U.S. trade rep, Jamieson Greer, open up new markets for the American farmer, or push for more domestic consumption of products coming from soybeans, from corn, from other agricultural products, from many of our other great agricultural states. So this is what we need to encourage. This is what we need to do. China has cheated us for a very long time. It's time to get it right.
The president's been obviously very bullish on China, but it's clear that he thinks he can get a deal and to get a deal soon. Obviously, the Chinese economy, the jury is out on how accurate those numbers are, and there are suggestions that they are actually suffering much more from the tariff wars than they're currently letting on. Do you think the president can get a deal? How soon do your constituents, your farmers, your state, how soon do you need that deal? And how long can you hold out playing essentially sort of tariff chicken at eye-watering levels of levies?
Yes, I would say the sooner the better on trade deals like yesterday would be great. Do I think the president can get these deals done? Yes, I do think he can get them done. The timing is critical. But one thing that we can focus on, especially within the agricultural community and for my farmers, is lowering the input costs. Right now, honestly, the price that we're getting for soybeans is it's maybe just a tiny little bit lower per bushel than the same period last year. So, we're seeing a continuance of the same low levels that we had of sales during the Biden administration. So we can't pin that on Trump with the tariffs. But what we have seen is an increase in input costs. Think about fertilizer. So we need to focus on those costs. If we can drive those costs down, then our farmers will be doing much better. So there's a number of ways to approach this.
Senator, the Chinese aren't going to want for nothing, are they? They're going to want some part in this deal. They're going to want America to turn a blind eye when they take Taiwan in their long-standing aggression towards Taiwan, and they consider it part of China. Are you confident that President Trump would stand by Taiwan if it came at a price of not getting a deal for your farmers?
I think what the president would do is make sure that deterrence is there. And we have seen a shift to the Indo-Pacific. And so following on to what Colonel West was saying as well, is we've got to be able to make Taiwan completely unappetizing to the Chinese. So that means providing them with the ability to defend themselves by providing arms, training. We're all about that, making sure that they are that proverbial porcupine
Yeah.
in the, to the Chinese. They don't want to take a bite because they're going to injure themselves. You rightly pointed out that the Chinese economy is suffering. We've got to push, arm where we can, deter how we can, and then hopefully we're not engaging American sailors, American Marines.
Do you think the
in
president
a fight
understands
that
that?
we don't
though?
want to be in?
Do you think the president understands that? Because if we could look at
I
how
think
he's,
the president
but look at how he's
does.
dealing with
Absolutely.
Ukraine. He is willing to give Ukraine. He's willing to give Putin land from Ukraine, and from where I'm sitting, that looks like a very clear invitation to the Chinese to, essentially, well, to coin a better phrase, faffo.
Well, I think it is very unfortunate, but I would say the president is a realist in this fight. We have seen several years of war in Ukraine under President Joe Biden, who was so reluctant to engage in arming the Ukrainians. He was so reluctant to even provide deterrence. He was pulling Americans and American fighting men that were training the Ukrainians out before the war even started. So President Trump is not doing that. President Trump has our American military working with the people of Taiwan.
Joe Biden did send long-range missiles. He did send tanks. He did send jets. Would you like to see President Trump up support for Ukraine?
Well,
I'm confused.
I am going to push back on that because President Biden only did it. Every time I went to President Biden and his national security advisor, Sullivan, it took 6 months of me pushing for them to even consider arming the Ukrainians. And it was with great reluctance. So many conversations I had in the skiff, pushing and pushing to no avail, only to have them concede months later that, oh, yes, we probably should have sent this at the beginning of the war. You know, this should have been shock and awe, and it was not. So the president is very real right now in the fact that it is very unlikely that we can gain some of that ground back from the Russians. And it hurts my heart to say that because I'm very closely connected to Ukraine and the people there. They are the breadbasket of Europe, much like Iowa provides so much food for our great United States. But unfortunately, this is the realistic situation on the ground. The Russians have an upper hand right now by having gotten that land. It's going to be very difficult to get them off of that land. I will do everything I can to encourage the president to do what we can for the Ukrainians. But again, he is very realistically situated right now in the fact that the Russians have gained the upper hand through many years of war in Ukraine. We don't want that to see that in Taiwan.
If that is the case, then it's a final question, and you strike a poignant thought there. If America was just going to pull the plug in the end and give this land to Putin on the current lines, essentially, give or take a few kilometers here and there, carve up the Donbass, carve up the east of Ukraine. The east of Ukraine, there we go. What was the point of the last 3 years? That deal could have been done. That deal could have been done months and months and years ago without the loss of millions of lives on either side.
Yes, the Russians have not gained much in the last year, but you were absolutely correct. And President Trump, every time he engaged President Putin, Vladimir Putin, in those discussions, he thought he was gaining an opportunity for a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. And every single time Putin, he went ahead and would send missiles into Ukraine, which killed many more of those Ukrainian soldiers, many more in the civilian population. And I think that President Trump has really had a hard awakening to the fact that you cannot trust Vladimir Putin. And so he's getting to a point where we need to finish this. We need to settle it. We need to find an agreement. And then all hell will break loose. After some agreement is made, we arrange a ceasefire. If it continues to happen after that, then I know that there will be heck to reckon with coming from President Putin and from NATO. So I think at some point we need to see peace. I know that this comes at a very heavy cost, especially for our Ukrainian friends. Vladimir Putin, he is vile, he is despicable, he is evil. But at some point, we've got to lessen the wounds to Ukraine and make sure that they will survive for another day.
Senator, thank you for joining us tonight. If a slightly depressing note to end on there, but thank you for coming on Save the West. Come back and see us soon.
Thank you so much.
Sarah Selep, that is, at the end of the day, I think we're going around in circles here tonight in the fact that you've got China, Donald Trump trying to deal with China. You've got Taiwan, China breathing down Taiwan's neck. You've got Donald Trump trying to solve the situation in Ukraine that is essentially, as the senator said, they're going to come at a cost of giving up land. Those two things basically inherently are a problem. If China see Donald Trump settle Ukraine by giving up land, they're not going to give the US a good trade deal without Taiwan.
No, I agree with that completely. And it was interesting to see what Senator Ernst said on that. I mean, I trust her on many, many issues, but she is the person to know trade for agriculture, national security. She's been in the room where it happens, right? And it was very interesting of her to mention the breadbasket. Ukraine being the breadbasket of Europe in Iowa. I've never heard that, but that is very, very true. And I guess it does come back to, circling back to your original question in the last segment, but I don't know if Trump and Putin actually have this really close relationship or if it's the difference between a colleague and a friend. It's a work acquaintance. Would you actually go to them for something legitimate? I think it's a sense of respect. And I want the best for Ukraine. Everybody wants the best for Ukraine, but depleting our resources is never going to be the right answer.
Well, as Donald Trump said, America needs these tomahawks as well. Like we can't just give them away without replenishing the supplies. Obviously, the president's off to meet the Chinese. He's very bullish about the prospects of a deal. The senator there was very bullish about needing one. Do you think he's actually going to get one? I mean, the Chinese don't do these things quickly, do they?
No, they don't. But we've been expecting them to wage some sort of war on America and the rest of the world for some time, right? We're waiting for an AI war, technological
hacking. I mean, who knows took out Amazon this morning?
Yeah. But we didn't expect a trade war to this extent. And the Ukrainian-Russian war, all eyes are on America. We've been talking about Gaza, Israel for so long, and it finally came to an end, right?
No, exactly. The attention span of the West seems to be able to focus on one thing at a time.